just talk a little bit about the theology of the body?
Sure.
Yeah. What is a body?
Okay.
Let's talk a bit about that. You're also like a psychologist, right?
Yeah.
That's
Well,
pretty cool.
I not technically. I have a master's degree in clinical psychology.
Okay.
So in America, to be a licensed clinical psychologist, you have to be a PhD.
Okay.
So I would have had something called a licensed professional counselor, which is a master's level.
Yeah.
But I don't have that anymore because I didn't keep it. I didn't want to do that.
In Australia, we tend to have we tend to let lots of people do lots of stuff.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's great.
So my master's is in clinical psychology with an emphasis on marriage and sex.
Okay, fantastic. I don't know you well enough to joke too much, but
You can joke. You can.
because you're a single guy, right?
Yeah. So I'm not married.
That's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So, can we just talk a little bit about the body? Why did God choose to make people with bodies and physically, rather than just be spiritual beings floating around with God? It would have been awesome. But God chose to make a physical embodied people.
Yeah.
Why did God do that? Why is that important now? Because the spin-off is we're having a lot of issues with our bodies right now.
Yeah.
And maybe even disassociation with bodies and a lot of just challenges with this area. I feel like it's a theology that's kind of a gap.
Yeah.
When I say theology, I just mean thinking rightly in a God way about
Correct.
it.
Yeah.
Can you just talk to us about your thoughts on that?
Sure. So I think we should expect there to be a gap around the theology of the body when for 180 years Christianity made the whole goal about being disembodied.
Yes.
Okay. So if for 180 years the entire goal is to go somewhere when we die,
Float away to
like right,
Yeah.
rapture
to a
and
place called heaven.
yeah, we're gonna go somewhere
harps.
else, right? Yeah, right. When the entire theology around those things in a certain element of Christianity. This is, to be fair, I got to be fair to my Eastern Orthodox brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
It has not been true in their world.
Right.
But in our world, for certain.
I'd say a lot of people in the West don't even know what Eastern Orthodox means.
Right.
They've never even heard of it, so that's probably
They're
fine.
the early church, so the people who gave us the Bible.
Okay.
But for our, that really doesn't matter because we're talking about our world. So in our world, you cannot expect to make the entire theology about going somewhere else in a disembodied way to not at some point pay the price with people being confused about the role of the holiness of their body, right? And so the culprit is squarely us.
Yes.
It is squarely a heaven-only mentality.
Yes.
It is squarely the idea that the ultimate goal is to get somewhere else. Whereas in the Jewish world and in the Eastern Orthodox world, they wouldn't really ask, do you go to heaven when you die?
Right.
They would ask, if you walked into heaven tomorrow, would you like it?
Right.
Right. So like an example I like to use is, and this will get us to the body, because let's talk about the most basic thing about a person's body, the color of their skin. Okay. So what if someone's a racist? If a racist walked into heaven tomorrow, and the only reason he got in is because with 2 seconds left in his life, he authentically accepted Christ. Okay? So this dude, KKK, right, dies, and he wakes up at a table with every tribe, tongue, and race. Is he in heaven or hell? But to the racist, heaven is hell.
He might not like it.
He wouldn't like it. And so this is why I'll give someone $10,000 if they can show me one time Jesus stopped a sermon and asked someone to accept him in their heart to be their personal Lord and Savior in order to go to heaven when you die.
Right.
That was never Jesus' invitation. How did something Jesus never said became our main thing?
Yeah.
And then expect to get the body right? Like Jesus' invitation was far more profound than that, which is, here's what heaven looks like. Allow this to be so far established in you today that when you do walk into heaven, you don't get whiplash. And step one of that is stop thinking people less human than you because they look different. And so in the South, I'll give you an example. In the South, in America, where I come from, in 1950, the most Christian city on earth was Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah.
98% of everybody went to church on Sunday and Wednesday.
Incredible.
But it was also illegal in 1950 for a black person to go to a white dentist. So what would happen is Christian white dentists would make black people go to the vet to get their teeth fixed, fully demonstrating the possibility of your full faith being in the sacrifice of Jesus to save your individual butt from hell, but missing the point about Jesus' love for the whole world.
Yeah.
And so this is the whole problem about seeing the cross as a way out of hell.
As a ticket to
Right,
somewhere.
versus
Yeah.
a technology that inspires us to bring heaven to every place we see hell here,
Right.
to allow heaven to be established in us now. How does a Christian person tell someone that doesn't look like them, you got to go to the vet to get your teeth fixed, and still go to church on Sunday? But they did. They all did. And so I'm not pointing any one particular person out. I'm talking about systemic problems.
Yep.
Well, then once you have civil rights, not sorted, but better, and once there's less of that, well, then the confusion's got to go somewhere else.
Yep.
And when it comes to our body, there was something. How old are you, man?
37.
All right, I'm 47. So you came in on the tail end of purity culture.
Yep.
Tail end. It was ending. I was smack dab in the middle of it.
Yep.
And what happened was, to make this short, was the people born in the 40s were sexually out of control.
Right.
I mean,
Sexual revolution. Yeah.
oh yeah. And the science on this is unthinkable. Like the promiscuity of the generation born in the 40s, unthinkably promiscuous. Like I was so shocked by the findings that I took it to my dad. My dad was born in 46. And I was like, Dad, I don't want to know the details, bro. But
Yeah. My dad was born in 42. He
Yeah.
has 11 children.
well, yeah. And that's just somebody that likes sex with no birth control. If he was in a monogamous relationship with your mom, I'm talking about flat promiscuity. Right? Like, I'm talking about, like, so I said to my dad, I said, I don't want to know the details, but do you agree or disagree with this, you know? And Dad said, I want to make sure I understand this. Is that thing saying I had more sex or less sex than my grandchildren? I said, Dad, way more. Like, infinite. Like, a lot more. And Dad went, for sure. He said, man, I was 17 years old in 1963, bro. Of course. So when I hear a 75-year-old go, oh, this generation these days. What, you got amnesia? Okay. Yeah, like, are you serious? So, and I want to be fair to them. Even that generation was far more pure than, say, the British Empire or worse, the Roman Empire.
Sure.
I mean, the world's better than it's ever been.
Yeah.
Like, just as one example about how the body gets messed up. So there was a group of people called the Gali, Galli, okay? They were underclass boys that were kidnapped from their villages and forced to serve as slaves in the temple of Kibbalah, who was a female goddess. Yeah. And what they did is they emasculated them. They just cut everything off. They made them wear wigs or grow their hair out, and then they dressed them up like women and made them play flutes, like in the temple. So, right? And I just blew into the mic. That was not good. You know, right? I am a professional. So, and then they were forced to be to endure horrendous assault by overclassed people. So when Paul says it's really shameful for a man to dress up like a woman and wear his hair long, he's not talking about your haircut choice in 2023. He's talking about the raping of boys in the temple. And so I believe that God is redeeming the whole broken thing, and he's doing a really good job, and he's not close to done, but it's anything we're seeing today is Nickelodeon compared to back then. Okay. Right. and probably Nickelodeon compared to the 60s, right? And so what happened is because the 60s and 70s were out of control, by the early 80s to the late 90s, there was something called purity culture. And purity culture taught us to have a horrendous relationship with our body. It was toxic, horrible. Let me mince no words. There was nothing good about it, okay? And because the images were spoiled. So here are things I actually saw with my own two eyes. I was in a youth meeting where they put a white wedding dress on the stage, and the preacher took a thing and slung mud. And there's these little splotches of mud all over this wedding dress, and he said, that's what you'll look like on your wedding day if you mess up, right? Or they took a bottle of water and they put 2 drops of ink in it. It's just 2 mistakes. It's just 2 mistakes, and they shake it up. That's what you look like, right? And then they said really dumb things like, see, these people are younger. They're looking at me like that was never said. Believe me, look at their faces. These 2 right here, I just happened to do this, and both of them were like,
They're engaged, so.
but they're also young, and they're horrified by the stupidity, right? And so but nobody over there is. They're like, oh yeah, that's right, that's right. We were told that kind of dumbness. And then this is stuff I heard. Like a youth pastor told a whole room of people, and let me be clear, he said it to everybody, but he was talking to the girls. The onus was on the girls way more than on the boys. Like, it's kind of the girl's fault if, right? That was the implication. And he said, listen here, the greatest gift you can give your future spouse is your virginity. No, it's not. I could think of 100 things you'd rather your future spouse be than a virgin. Like supportive, kind, have integrity, not lazy, good with money, generous, yet a responsible receiver, like someone that promotes peace in the home, like a virgin, like I don't bathe, but I'm a virgin. Here's your prize, I'm going to gamble all the money away, but I'm a virgin. You're welcome. Like it just led to the stupidest stuff. And the problem was the ruined images. Like your purity's like a diamond. And if you scuff it, you can never unscuff it. Well, that's not the gospel. And so what it did is it created a toxic relationship with people with their bodies from a ditch on this to trying to avoid my parents' generation of the 60s. They created another ditch on this side that was like really harmful and really toxic. Yeah. Imagine telling a girl her whole life, ignore your sexual side at all. And then when you get married, it'll all come on at once and it's going to be awesome.
Right.
Likely not. Likely you've created enough baggage and images that's gonna create harm. Yeah. So the question is how do we honor God with our bodies? And I've got a few thoughts on that. One.
Well, let me just say before you get to that, I think just want to affirm that because we pastored in Japan 15 years. Sexually, it's out of control. It's wild.
Oh, is it?
But it's just not talked about.
Okay.
So underneath, it's a party, but it's not like that on the surface.
Yeah.
And I think my wife and I did like pre-marriage preparation for maybe 50 or 100 young couples. And I think probably the biggest thing that we had to talk about was sex is good.
Right.
Because mostly it was a feeling of sex is bad.
Yeah, shame-based images.
Shameful. And I saw that was surprising to me.
Yeah.
But we had to spend most of the time in a positive creating new positive images around sex.
Yeah, and just pleasure. Like, because really close to sex is bad is all pleasure is bad. Right? And so then you don't even know how to tell your partner what you want. It's just all sort of taboo and bad. And then we ask the stupidest questions known to man, like, is it right or wrong? Can I still go to heaven if I do it? Yeah. How far can I go and still go to heaven if I do it? Right? Or I was in a Q&A. This is pretty recent, actually. I was in a Q&A. I just got to. I'll make sure. There's no kids in here, are there?
No.
Oh, okay, great. So I was
a few childish people, maybe.
Yeah, but that's okay. So I was in this Q&A, and it was one of these situations where you could text anonymous questions to a phone, like 44826, and like no one knows who it's from or anything. And this is live. Like I'm talking. There's 1,000 people in the room, and it's flipping live. And so the MC goes, the next question is it a sin to masturbate? You know? And I thought, what a dumb way to frame that question.
Yeah.
Like, is it like yes or no, quick? Is it a sin? Well, the first question is where are you? If you're in drive-thru at McDonald's, yes, it's a sin. Are you in the middle seat in an airplane? It is definitely a sin. Like, are you how dumb is that, right? And I'm going, what? Right? Like, it's not a great spectator sport, you know? Are other people involved? You know, or are there a bunch of wee little people? Like, what's like all this is contextual. So, and all of that results in a theology of the body that is confusing at best. And then the people who purport that theology then look down on people for being confused about their body. It's like, well, hold on.
Right.
And there's several answers to this that I think are helpful. I don't think they're complete. I think they're helpful. But I think the most helpful answer comes back to the thing you mentioned earlier. Salim, male and female, image bearers.
Yeah.
I think instead of asking, is it right or wrong? Or can I go to heaven if I do it? Or how far can I go? I think the far better question is, does my sexual behavior, if perpetuated, I'm not talking about mistakes. I'm talking about does my sexual behavior, if perpetuated into perpetuity, does it honor the image bearer in the person or does it objectify them? I think that solves, I'm guessing, but 85 to 90% of issues when it comes to behavior.
Right.
Not that I'm not talking about orientation issues or gender issues or birth issues. I'm talking about just sexual behavior. Does my sexual behavior objectify them or honor the? I mean, that would handle the porn issues.
Yeah.
That would handle adultery issues. And of course, there's less promiscuity today than the 60s. Of course there is, because if girls are taught from birth, think higher of yourself, and boys are taught from birth, respect women more. Well, there's going to be less promiscuity because there's less objectification. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to evince itself in the one pure picture that somebody is picturing as some ideal. But it's certainly better than the erotica narrative. I think like there's a way to relate to someone from sexuality, and there's a way to relate to someone from genitality. And sexuality relates to someone from your identity. Genitality relates to someone for your identity. And that's two different things. Yeah. Because the greatest gift you can give your partner is being okay without them. Because if you know who you are without them, then, let's say, if you don't know who you are without them, you'll need them. And that's okay in attraction. That kind of feels good. They need me, right? Nobody wants to live with someone that needs them. They can't carry the weight of that. But when you know who you are without them, you can give them the gift of not needing them. And that frees you to want them. And that's far more profound. And I think there's some principles around image bearer and objectification. There's some image around temple issues, like where does God, if God lives there, then I can dissociate my body from my behavior. But if God is in me and holding the whole thing together and them together, then there's no indictment. Like if anybody listening to this has been hiring prostitutes, I want you to know you'd be welcome here into Journey. And like that's something I've never done. And it's not because I'm a holy person. It's probably because I'm scared of things. So I've just never thought to do. But if you prostitution only works if you objectify them. Because if you see one God holding the whole thing together, that's not a behavior you can really engage in. And so there's my body's a temple issue. And then there's scapegoating. so I'm doing this off the top of my head because it's not like they sent me all these questions, but there's scapegoating, which is I'm going to absolve myself from dealing with my issue here because at least I'm not like them.
Right.
And so I think sex is very closely related to food because, and I don't mean using strawberries in sex. These are metaphors. I mean, the way we relate to food and the way we relate to sex has a similar psychology because both are pleasure-based and both are need-based, right?
Right.
So there are sexual anorexics, and to be fair, in purity culture, that's what we were taught.
Yeah.
Just ignore it. Turn it off. Don't give it any place. You're like, yeah, but I'm 14 and I wake up in the morning and things are happening, and what do I what do I do? In the Bible, 5 weeks after their first period, they were married. So it's hardly that they had to wait. There was no such thing as you had your first period, you were married in 5 weeks.
You're not getting married at 30.
You were dead at 32, which is why there was less divorces. Because till death do us part was more doable, right? It's like, well, hang on. So sometimes I'll say to somebody being belligerent, okay, I'll give you some money if you can tell me one place where it says don't have sex before you're married, right? And they can't really do it because it doesn't say it like that.
Right.
Because in the Bible, I get the principle, but in the Bible, they got sex before marriage would have been forbidding child sex. Like, don't have prepubescent sex.
Right.
Which
doesn't really work.
Yeah, amen. Right? And so you're the sexual anorexics are kind of dangerous in the sense that they don't have a good relationship with their own body. They don't have a good relationship with their own pleasure, with their own what do I enjoy? They're often confused about what they want in life because it leaks out, right? The whole thing is well, I'm not allowed to identify what gives me it's bad. So there's sexual anorexics. And then there's sexual gluttons.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous too. And I wouldn't say one's more dangerous than the other.
Right.
I would say they're different. Sexual gluttons sexual anorexics were angels. Not sexual at all. Sexual gluttons we're animals. We're just flipping food for the stomach for food. God will destroy it all. We may as well go for it, right? Which, by the way, in Corinth, that's how you hired a prostitute. You would go to the prostitution house and say, food for the stomach and the stomach for food. God will destroy them all. Because prostitution in the first century was raping underclass. Nobody was there by choice. They were underclass people who were forced to serve in these brothels.
Right.
And so food for the stomach for food, God will destroy it. So you got sexual anorexics, and then you got sexual gluttons. But then in the middle, you have something I think is the most dangerous, and that's sexual bulimics. The people who they can't control themselves, so they binge, and then they feel so bad about binging, they purge.
Yeah.
And when we relate to anything around pleasure that way, it becomes very unhealthy. And so I think if you wanted me to simplify this, I would say come back to two tensions. One, does my behavior honor the image bearer or the object? And does my behavior honor the sacred, or is it profane? So profanity just is taking something that's sacred and treating it as if it's common. And I think those two tensions alone give us enough to wrestle with around how do we handle our own bodies. And to me, the people who try to make it the most simple, this is simple. It's not, because there's all kinds of one, and this is no indictment, but what percentage of people in this room right now can tell us how sex develops biologically? Maybe 2, and I would be one of them, because my master's degree is in it. So when people who can't even tell you how sex develops biologically are trying to make rules around sex, they probably should learn more before they speak, right? And so you have that ignorant side of it, and then and then they try to oversimplify it. And the people who do that tend to hide the most, and sexual darkness tends to thrive in hidden spaces.
Yep.
And so there's image-bearing objects, temples or gods distant. There's sacred or profane, and then at the end of the day, we have to discuss, or at least wrestle inside of ourselves with how we relate to anything that gives us pleasure, not just sexuality. Because the problem with objectifying a person is that it leaks. So if I objectify the actor on the pornography store or whatever, that's one thing. But if I learn to objectify her, I'll objectify the person who cut me off in traffic. I'll objectify the person I'm in the car with and they're driving. I'll objectify the waiter who takes too long to get my order. I'll objectify the nurse at my doctor's office who isn't moving fast enough. And we'll start to see people as objects to serve us instead of one God holding us all together.
Yeah, so I love that it's more of a holistic approach you're trying to.
Oh, 100%. And I would just say this is I just recently, 4 weeks ago, did a 2-hour masterclass on sexuality. And so if you YouTube Grace City Church, Albany, Georgia, Shane Willard sexuality, there'll be 2 parts that come up. I actually didn't know they were recording it at the time, but they did. And they were recording it for an in-house thing, but it got posted. And then now I'm getting feedback everywhere. You got to do this. And it's meant to be an introduction. There's an 11-part series on my table around how to think about this topic better.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it's 11
That's
parts.
awesome.
And they were done, it's done as 15-minute segments that are meant to be discussion-based at the end.
Awesome.
So it's meant to be a discipleship aid.
Love that. Love that. Super important. Man, really appreciate jumping into this topic.
Sure.
Wow, just so blessed.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. We really appreciate you.
Likewise.
Can't wait to have you back.
Come on.
To discuss more. I think we've all got food for thought here. And really appreciate your time.
Hey.
God bless.
It's been great.